disturbed during of the workshop.
Yeah. One second. Sorry, somebody's trying to record this thing. You may record it, record the audio if you wish, but don't record. I'm not going to give permission to record this. Thank you.
All right. So please keep yourselves on mute if you're watching on Zoom, and we will take questions at the end. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. We have some parents here physically as well, so I'm going to be looking at them, but you can definitely listen in. All right. So our topic today is effective functioning of the Montessori classroom, free from reward, punishments, praise, and criticism. Now, I think all of us have been through schooling where we've always had the reward punishment system or praise and criticism system. So I think it's difficult sometimes for us to understand how Montessori classrooms actually work and whether it will really work for the child in the long run. Or is this something that can be classified as this gentle parenting, which doesn't always work? So we are here today to see why Montessori even had this concept. And considering she started her schooling process in a day and age when reward and punishment was literally like spare the rod and spoil the child. I mean, how could she even fathom something like this? And what was the reason that led her to even create a system that could actually function in this way? So if we look at reward and punishment or praise and criticism, they are all forms of extrinsic motivation. So it's something external, basically meaning that we believed that there was some external control needed to either encourage behavior that was good or desired, or something that was needed to stop a punishment or some external consequence needed to stop bad behavior from recurring again. So if we look at it, it's actually a doctrine that was there right from ancient times, right? So even if you look at tribal people or, if you look at men when they just began, even if it didn't rain and there was a period of drought, it was considered as God being angry and punishing them for something. Our ideas of heaven and hell or anything, if you are good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell. These are all something that existed right from ancient times. And even modern schooling, if you look at the behaviorist school of thought in psychology, it clearly functioned on conditioning, that everything is dependent on your experience of something. If there is a consequence that is negative, you may not want to engage in that behavior again. If there is something that you're rewarded for, you are likely to repeat that behavior. But all of this somehow took away that humanness. Because if you think of, for example, if you look at Hitler, right, when he started his thing of killing the Jews, and when that was legal at that time, somebody who hid Jews was punished. You were breaking the law, right? At the same time, if you look at something like slavery, right, it was considered okay during a particular period of time. And if you actually tried to free slaves, again, you were punished. So we have to understand that humans or the people who dared, even in those times, to challenge that law for whatever reason, had some thought or feeling where they questioned that is there this clear demarcation of right, wrong, good, or evil always? Or are they all just concepts that we keep thinking of? So if we look at the child now today, if we look at the child, there are various factors that affect every child right from the time of conception. Okay. And that's why we always encourage in Montessori systems, like especially in toddler classrooms, or when you fill out that form, it is something that we look out at quite carefully. And if you see, Harmony always has had this procedure of saying, let us know as soon as there is some change in your environment. Because physiological and psychological characteristics affect the child. And if the teacher knows about any of these little upsets that have happened with any child through the course, right from birth itself, we can be more equipped to sort of help them out in those situations. So that is why it is very important, especially right from the young age when children don't have language or cannot always express themselves or their feelings. Now, what are some of the things that could go wrong, right? If you look at the time from conception, there could be hereditary diseases that the child is carrying. The parents' age when the child is born, some of them were very young, some of us were older parents. The mother's sort of demeanor and everything during pregnancy, right? Some of us, it may have been very difficult. You might have been going through something at the same time. There's so many parents who've said, while we were pregnant, our own parents passed away and we were so all over the place and things like that. Did the mother have any accidents or falls during that period, or illnesses like German measles or anything that could have cropped up during that phase? Was it a normal birth, or was there any anxiety? I know of a very close friend who the delivery was normal to start with, and then the doctors realized there was a complication and they had to do an emergency C-section. And when they pulled out the baby, because it was such an emergency, they had to get it out within a few seconds, literally. The baby's shoulder was fractured. So again, the baby was in the hospital for almost a month with the mother and things like that. So there could be many things that affect the child's birth, or things right from the start. Also, your home life. As parents, are we anxious? Are we severe? Are we too lenient? Lots of things can affect the child. Also, has the child had any frights or shocks, head injury or something after birth? Right? So all of these things could play an important role in how the child acts out in various situations, or the kind of characteristics that seem to come up when they are in public or join schools or even at home. So one of the reasons why Montessori refuted this idea of praise and criticism and things was that she felt that all these indicated that the child had some kind of defect, right? And obviously, we have to encourage behavior that has to be conformed to this certain idea of good, or there is this behavior that is clearly bad and has to be stopped. You're trying to say that the child has some defects. Now, yes, even she agreed that there are certain behaviors that, or these so-called defects, behaviors that may be challenging and sort of hinder the child from progressing. So let us look at what these defects could be. So there are some defects that are classified as defects of strong children. Now, again, I'm giving you extreme situations, right? So I'm going to show you the two complete opposites, and all our kids would fall somewhere in between all of these things, right? There is no good and bad, as I'm saying. So when we talk about defects of strong children, we are talking about characteristics that are probably more out there or loud, right? They're not really making them stronger personalities, but these are things that literally draw you. That child is the one that is pulled up immediately, or it's like, oh my God, this kid has come into the party. That kind of idea. So some of the characteristics that show up in these things is, one, they're very capricious in the sense that they're very unpredictable or impulsive. So everyone's on tenterhooks when this kind of child enters into a space. They do have tendencies for violence, rage. Now, I'm talking about an extreme case. So please don't think that just because your child got angry or threw something, oh my gosh, they come under this. Okay, these are extremes, and all these factors would show up on a regular basis. Marked disobedience, aggression, possessiveness, in the sense that it's not just about their own things, but because all children like their own stuff. But this is about, if I see you with something, I will snatch it from you. So that sort of thing, or the need to claim something that is not even yours. Inability to focus attention or concentrate. Difficulty sometimes in coordinating the movements of the hand. So these are children who sometimes appear very clumsy, and sometimes it even is intentional. They're constantly banging into somebody. So they are the kid who will carry the stuff and say, bang into someone. The other child will be crying because they'll be like, just my mistake. So it happens, but on a repeated basis, you see something like this happening. They may shout, scream, disturb, tease others, almost in a manipulative way, where they're constantly picking on children, teasing them, not in a light-hearted manner. Now, what is the parent's response to this? Now, this is something I want all of you, whether you're on Zoom or here, to understand, because sometimes, even though our children are not at this extreme, but because they show some of these traits, we are very flustered as parents. Please don't be ashamed of your child, because you as a parent can correct them. And you as a parent, and if you have good educators, we can work on these things. The saddest part, what happens with children who especially show these out there characteristics, is that the parents tend to pass them on to somebody else. So the first thing you will see is they will hire a nanny, and then they will enroll them in 100 classes. The idea is that the child is away, the child is occupied, and somebody else is there constantly shadowing this child to just keep them in check or pull them back if something is happening. Now, what happens in this case? And Montessori has used a sentence, like I almost cried when I was just reading this sentence. She said, children become orphans living with parents. In this case, yeah, I was exactly like this. And that hit me so hard when I read her books. You know, she said they become orphans living with parents because you have now passed them off to this nanny or these classes, and they may not even enjoy it. They may behave there because of reward or punishment, but you're just keeping them occupied. You have given up on them. And ultimately, it leads to a child becoming hostile and more troublesome. They might do it in a slyer way, right? They might do it in a way that it's more manipulative, more, more excuses can be sort of claimed for that behavior or so.
Different behavior in every different environment.
But it's really sad. Now, in some cases, of course, the parents will indulge in smacking, severity, whatever, all these things. Again, this leads to just hostile behavior in different situations where they feel they can act that. Another thing sometimes that we do when we have children like this is go that emotional way. Why do you make mommy so unhappy? Again, this is as detrimental as the whacking or passing them on. So please refrain. We all do it at times, even though our children are not at these extremes. Let us be mindful. Let us be mindful as educators, as parents, to take care of something like this. Now, of course, we have the other extreme, which is what we call, or what Montessori termed as the defects of weak children. Now, this is exactly the opposite kind of behaviors. So instead of being out there and loud and aggressive, they are extremely passive, sometimes almost lazy to the point that they will not really do anything or pick up work. They cry a lot, so much so that there is always somebody sort of around to help them. And you will see other kind of psychological behaviors, like they may be anemic. They might either not eat much, or they will engage in senseless overeating. So there are a lot of these things which sort of feel like the child is not very well or anything. But again, over here, what happens is the parents' response is, even as educators, it actually doesn't disturb us, right? Because this child is not behaving badly in the class or not disrupting somebody else. They're usually the loner in the corner, very passive. And this is as detrimental. Because what happens is that the child continues in this pattern, and initially the parents almost feel happy sometimes. They feel my child is so obedient, they're so sensitive. Like they cling to me, they cling to parents. These are typically the children who will like cling to the parents. And the parent feels like, oh, they're so affectionate or loving. But after a point in time, as the child is getting older, the parent suddenly feels, okay, maybe there is something wrong, because now you notice there may be maybe a delay in speech or a delay in their motor coordination, because they've always been helped, right? Like everyone's around them to help them because they are so sensitive. And finally you'll find the parents saying, okay, I think something is wrong, and then they will take them to therapists or doctors or whatever to get them checked out. Now, okay. But what Montessori said, that when she looked at all of these defects or whatever, she felt that everything had some base in those initial years of the child's life. So there was something that happened sort of right in the beginning that led to these behaviors sort of becoming a part of his personality, or so on, or so called, I would say. And for her, the biggest evil in all of this was a starved mind. She felt that if the child did not have enough activities or things where they could actually develop concentration, or things that actually catered to their development, that is when these deviations seem to occur. And in many places, she said that she saw that it was children were almost left alone. It was like they had nothing to do but sleep. People who pass off babies as, oh, they just, all they do is sleep. They're not meant to be doing anything, or they can't touch anything. Or grown-ups doing too many things for them. And this is one of the biggest evils, I think, of the modern society, with people being able to afford domestic help, right? Because you have somebody constantly doing things for them. So very often we see, there's a child who they come into school, or even when they are playing in the playground, and they'll pick up a flower, and they look at it, or they'll stop to admire a leaf, and you'll have the nanny saying, hurry up, jaldi chalo, jaldi, and move them away. So what has happened is the child who naturally had a desire or that keenness to explore or work was cut off right from the beginning. And now the child felt like, what's the point, of even looking or doing something? Because every time I go to do something, you will snatch it out of my hands.
Also, constant instructions.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
my office is right there. So I hear parents playing with they bring them there to play, but they are constantly instructing as if the child has no brain.
Yeah.
And they have to give all instructions. Now go on the slide. Now put your next foot. I mean, he'll figure out.
Yeah. So when we talk about now, with all these characteristics that we feel, okay, they were part, even Montessori noticed that children were coming in with these characteristics. And obviously, at some point of time, it would cause disruption in some environment or the other. What did she notice when they came into Montessori environments, or the environments that she had created at that time to understand children better? And if you think of a Montessori environment, because many of you have seen the class, you will see that our environments are beautifully prepared with activities that mainly cater to the developmental needs of children at each age that they are going to be in that classroom. That preparation is something that is done first. It is a setup that is made to naturally entice the child, or create an interest in certain work. And she felt that when they came into these environments, the first thing she noticed was visible disappearance of many of these defects. They were surrounded by interesting things to do. She saw that, spontaneous activity, the need to pick up something because it's on open shelves. It was naturally attracting the child. So they would pick up something in that entire day that they spent there. They were given the freedom to repeat. If they wanted to work at something or improve on a skill, or spend a little more time doing something, because everyone's level of understanding is different, everyone's level of sort of taking in material or your comprehension of an activity is different. And here they had that opportunity. As long as they were not misusing the material, they were given that freedom to keep doing it, to perfect themselves. And when this happened, she saw children move from one spell of concentration to the other. If you see, the children do different activities through the day. They're also in a classroom where everyone is doing something different. So the distraction is 10 times higher than in a regular school where everyone's doing the same thing. Yet, there was some connection because I can choose what appeals to me or what I feel I need to work on at this moment. And what she said happened was when children had this phase, when they had the time in these environments and they got to explore and they slowly developed that concentration. She said the disorderly children seemed to become orderly. The passive suddenly became active. And those children who were initially classified as troublesome suddenly started showing a need to help others. And this is something we have all seen, we do see it in our environments. And that's why she said that these so-called defects were now, she had this sort of, it was in her face now that these defects were not something that are innate or inborn. They're only something that is acquired. They're defects that are acquired because of some lack that happened, right? During the course of from their birth till when she saw them in the classroom. And if they are not innate or inborn, the beauty is that we can change it and correct. So it is all workable if we are given the right environments. And she said when she observed these children, she said she found that their real wish, the only thing children actually wanted to do was work. Now, work for a child could be many different things, right? Work could be watering a plant, work could be doing something very academic, work could be helping a friend. But there was this natural need to engage in things like that. So what happened? They had the power to choose in these environments. They could follow the inner guide, right? I can choose to take this work. I can work for it for as long as I want. And when they busied themselves with something, and this is each child in the class doing something different, it gave them some serenity and joy. And that's when she saw this very peaceful atmosphere that emerged in the classroom. And she said, this is spontaneous discipline that happened. And that's when this whole idea of inner discipline coming in. When she realized that when the environment was prepared in this way and children were given interesting activities catering to their developmental needs, that helped to develop concentration, we saw inner discipline emerging. There was no need for external control or force required. There was no need for praising them or criticizing them. They just wanted to work, right? It was one kind of child. And how did this arrival of discipline happen? There were just two things. There was work and freedom, right? The environment had enough work for them to do, and they were also given the freedom to choose those activities. Now, if we look at a child between 0 to 3, okay, the child seems to be developing in isolation. Like most of us mothers would remember, right? From the time we give birth, there's that nurse. Is the baby latching? Is the baby latching? You're like sitting there exposed, and it's like, oh gosh, there's already there's this education that has started. Now, once the baby finally latches, then okay, the baby has to suck. Then holding their head up, then slowly they will sit up, then they will crawl, then they have to walk, and then you have development of teeth. Now, all this happens in isolation. This happens in this month, and something else, and something else, and something else. But when the child reaches 3 and comes to the primary class, that 2.5, 3 age group, we see a unification of personality. Now, what happens is the child has discovered that use of the hand, and they engage in a lot of work with their hands. And now you have the mind guiding the hand to work. So now there is some unification happening where it's the mind, and you have your intelligence, you have your hand, your motor coordination skills, and the willpower of the child pushing themselves to take up work or to do work. And Montessori said that this integration must happen for all children. It can happen at different times. But if this is not allowed to develop and there are too many deviations, then we have this unequal kind of personality that is exhibited in many children, right? You see that happening. And in those cases, with those children, what will happen is you find that the hand moves aimlessly. They tend to space out Yeah, like a lot of self-talk. Sometimes they find very hard to focus. They're often very far from reality. They're always in this fantasy world. Also, the body is very clumsy. They fall a lot, they bump into things a lot, they break things a lot. So again, these are signs of that whole thing not being unified, right? That mind and body and the willpower choosing to do something. It's a different thing if a child is making a choice saying, I don't want to do this and throwing a tantrum. It's very different from that. This is just the child is naturally struggling from within. And she said that these deviations cannot be attributed just to the child's personality. It is coming from a failure to organize this personality. That unification has not happened. And that is something that we need to work on if we feel that our children are exhibiting any of these sort of characteristics. And she said, when you have this environment that is beautifully prepared and you have these activities created, that is the time when you will see the true personality of the child. And the child is actually waiting to show you their true personality. Yeah. It's very often that we don't have the time or we don't have the equipment. And it could happen anywhere. It could happen at school. It could happen at home. Sometimes at home, we have the materials, but we don't have the time. Or we get phone calls just in the middle of teaching our children something. Sometimes even at school, there's an overcrowded class or a teacher who's just having a really bad day and not catching that moment. So it's nobody's fault. Let's stop blaming each other. Teachers will blame parents will blame teachers. Ultimately, we blame the therapist. But let us stop blaming and let us each try in our role to sort of create this space. If you look at child guidance clinics or even play therapy setups, why are these so similar to Montessori environments? It's because they have these prepared environments. They have lots of materials that actually cater to developmental needs of the child or various interests or imitate certain things at home. And there also, the therapist is giving them the choice to choose between these activities. The child will pick up. And that's when he starts showing his true personality. And the therapist then, obviously, a trained person can give inferences and guide the parent, and then so on and so forth. And the child, sort of gets better. But also, what happens is it's very important to give the child opportunities to integrate themselves. Now, what happens is sometimes, say, if a child breaks a glass and the parent says, I'm never going to give you a glass again. How will the child learn to be more careful? Right? Our parents did that with us. I was like this famous one of that deadline, when my father said you have to be home at 10 o'clock, that 10:15, 10:05, 10:10, it would always be crossing. And I remember my father telling me each time, he would have a clock on the wall opposite the door, and he would open the door and say, I'm letting you go out again the next time. I'm hoping you'll be more mindful. See, as children, we will always challenge. But when we realize that somebody is trusting us later, you become more mindful. Those experiences help us. You have to give the child the opportunity. You cannot just write them off. You guide them, you tell them that next time, we have to be a bit more careful. This is what we can do. Always reiterate what we can do and how things can be done. Don't focus on all the no's. And they will slowly learn, and give them that opportunity. Just because your child is, sometimes difficult or out there, doesn't mean you say that to spare myself that shame, I will never take them for a party in public because I can't handle it. Believe me, as they grow, if you have faith, at some point of time, they will really surprise you. They will behave so beautifully, or something that will shock you. You have to have that faith. You have to keep giving them opportunities. And this is what she said, that if work and freedom could cure those defects of growth, it means that our environments need exactly that to help children. Work and freedom. And we are not talking about freedom. I'm saying if the child is not ready or doesn't understand that responsibility, you can't just say do whatever you want. The environment has to be prepared. You choose activities that they can manage, that give them a little bit of a challenge. like Veena always says also, that if the child finds it too easy when we give that first presentation, it means we were late in presenting, because the activity did not pose any challenge. Okay. So even as teachers or as parents, to be mindful of things like that. It's very easy to keep your child occupied in front of a TV. To sit with them for an activity when they are learning, teaching them even to write between the lines is a nightmare, right? So it will take some time and effort and patience and everything, but you can do it. We can all do it. So when we talk, Montessori had used this term normalization, which he said comes from concentration. So what happens to get this normalization? She said when the child is engaged in an interesting activity, now it could be something as simple as a toddler activity of pouring water. Yes, so say just pouring water from these two glasses. So now this is an activity that the child, sorry. So I basically just have two glasses on a table here. Don't worry, you can just listen in. So what happens is that the first thing is that the child's attention is focused. When they've chosen the activity, I'm naturally interested, right? So my attention is focused and there's an interest. Now, when I'm trying to pour, I'm trying not to spill, obviously, right? So each time I pour, the child, now there are a few drops here, they will have a little napkin where they will be dabbing, things that have spilled. Now the child is working with such deep concentration, they keep on repeating an activity like this. They first pour it from here, then they'll pour it back here. Sometimes the child spends almost 7, 8, 10 minutes, 15 minutes doing an activity like this. It's something very simple. It's not that they were doing math or language or anything, but it has caused the child to now work because it's something that interests him. He is working to now coordinate his movements. You will see that they will actually sit straighter so that their wrist is, this whole portion of the arm is firm. They'll try to pour. The teacher has given them one instruction that all this is that she has pointed, that basically if you hold or you pour in the middle of the glass, the spillage will be less. And they will keep trying to coordinate their movements. Now, what is happening is that the body is starting to work and the mind is constantly telling them that do it like this, and the willpower. And this is where that unification of personality is happening. Small little spurts in each day-to-day activity that they do, right? Because they are developing concentration. So it's that mind and the body and the willpower pushing together to do something, and then slowly they concentrate. And when they finish it, they feel really good about themselves. I've accomplished this. And this is where, I will always say that it's very important as a teacher and as a parent. You've seen your child doing this really wonderful thing. You refrain from giving that praise. If they look at you, you can just smile. Yeah. Or your child says, see, and you can say, yeah, I saw you do it. Nothing more. Because the minute you say, wow, very good, and you start clapping your hands, you have shifted this whole process to whether or not I get external gratification. Now, the next time when the child does it, it's not about him focusing and doing, it's about whether you will say good at the end. Something so beautiful that was developing was snatched away. And that is something that's key. I know we are all just trying to motivate our kids, right? The intention was never anything bad. But this is the flip side of it. So somewhere, let us refrain from being this one who has to be the know-it-all. Yes, very good. Or yes, very bad. I think you did it well. Let the child discover. They'll do it better than us also. We were not the ultimate. So, yeah. So as she said, also when we talk about, this is again something I want to reiterate, is that when we talk about developing concentration, please understand that there is a difference between concentration and occupation. Right? The activity has to naturally interest the child. There has to be some free choice. I'm not saying put them for a class where they are occupied. That is also an activity and they may do it very well. Why they are doing it well, we may never know, whether they are actually interested in doing it brilliantly or whether it's because the teacher is very strict or however it works. But it has to be this sort of concentration that will change their entire way they look at themselves or they behave. And when this happens, the normalized child, the so-called normalized child, will show spontaneous discipline. They are happy. They like to work. I'm not talking about them being workaholics and this child who's just doing brilliantly in school. They have their own intelligence levels. They may be average academic children, but they are happy doing their work. They like doing stuff. They like helping others. They are not this child who does exceptionally well academically and will refuse to help others because they are afraid that this child will do better than them. They're very secure about how they move about in environments. So when this was Montessori's words, when she talked about the kind of material that they should have or the activity, she said it's an interesting piece of work, freely chosen, which has the virtue of inducing concentration rather than fatigue. As parents, many times, those of us who have children who are more high strung, you'll hear many people say, keep him occupied. Put him in this class. Put him in this sport because he will be occupied. He will be so tired that when he comes home, he won't irritate you at all. Or she won't irritate you at all. Yeah. An interesting piece of work, freely chosen, which has the virtue of inducing concentration rather than fatigue. Okay, it adds to the child's energies and mental capacities. And it leads him ultimately to self-mastery. So always remember this. Don't try to just keep them occupied.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. I have the upgraded version of Zoom, but for some reason it's just constantly giving me instruction it pops up that meeting will end soon. So in case if it does, then please rejoin again. I'll start the same link again. Thank you.
Okay. And just to, since we are still used to that old idea of reward punishment, I'm just going to reiterate a few things about why it sort of doesn't always work. So as we stated right in the beginning of the workshop, that these are just external forms of motivation. It makes the children unable to